Hello and welcome back to another episode of Your Goddess Awakened. We are going to talk about our bodies. That's probably not your favorite topic. It certainly wasn't mine for a really long time. However, it's something that comes up all the time in my work. And it's something that I feel like takes up so much of our energy.
Learn the ways of the goddess and accomplish much more with so much less effort. Welcome to Your Goddess Awakened with Hallie Evelyn, a show dedicated to helping you embrace your divine feminine and nurture your inner goddess for a radiant life. We invite you to join us every week to receive goddess wisdom that will help you through your current obstacles and lifelong traumas. Awaken the goddess within you and transform your business and your life. Only here on Your Goddess Awakened.
When I was 6, I was a size 6. When I was 8, I was a size 8. And when I was 12, I was a size 12. I thought that was how it went, right? Depending on your age, it went up in size. And I stayed between like a 14 and a 16 pretty much my whole adult life until I was in my mid 40s. There was a stint in right after I graduated college when I was working as a professional actress. And my agent said to me, you got to lose weight. You're not going to get cast if you don't lose weight. I was also instructed to grow my hair, which was very short at the time. It was just after the 80s. So Pat Benatar and I had the same haircut. And then, I was like a gym bunny, for the first time in my life, like 5 days a week. And it was such a struggle. And then whenever I got into alignment with what my body wanted, it really scared me. And I remember doing some kind of a weight loss program that involved a counselor. And in the first session, the counselor asked me what I was afraid of. And the answer leapt up immediately that I was afraid of being attractive. I was afraid of being beautiful. I was afraid of what would happen if people saw me in all of my power for who I really was. And I got off the phone call and I quit the program and I started gaining weight immediately. And that was the end of that until I was in my mid 40s when I discovered 12-step. And 12-step, like as in Alcoholics Anonymous. Turned out there are three programs for food. And the first one is, in descending order of less draconic, it's FA, which is for Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous. That's what that stands for. And then there's CEA HOW, which is Compulsive Eaters Anonymous. And the HOW stands for Honesty, Openness, and Willingness. So you have to be honest, open, and willing to participate. And then the least draconic is the least restrictive program is OA, Overeaters Anonymous. And I was in those rooms in 12-step for about 2.5 years. Gave up flour, sugar, and alcohol for that entire period of time. Took me about 6 months to release all of the weight that I wanted, which was 40 pounds. People started coming up to me and saying I was too thin. I needed to gain weight. I was like looking over my shoulder, like, who are they talking to behind me? Because it surely wouldn't be me. And I got right a little bit after that when I moved to Miami. They called me when I got there. They called me La Gringa or La Americana, which means the white person or the non Latin person or the American. And then they also called me Flaca, and Flaca is Spanish for skinny. And again, I was like, who are they talking to? And it was so weird for me to be the person who had no weight problems and to be, because I moved and I was outside of my regular environment and out, my friends who had seen me go through all of these struggles for years, they really saw me very differently. The new people just thought I was always thin. That was the assumption. And I remember at the time, like being on a plane and stretching. I love to stretch and do yoga on a long flight. And I remember a woman came up to me and she said, "Did you used to be a dancer?" And I was like, no, like the idea that I would have had a dancer's body alone was so strange to me. It was so funny to me, that assumptions that people just make because of the way that your body looks. I had gotten to a point in my, with when I had gained enough weight. I was about 180 pounds when I started down the path of 12 step. Men had stopped looking at me, the men had stopped looking at me. And all of a sudden they're looking at me again. And now, because I had been through a spiritual process for myself of no longer being afraid of being too big in the world, where I no longer needed to worry about my body being too big, and I could just kind of let that go. And so I really felt like that was when I came into my own power and into my own allowing of me to just be physically. And 12 step was fascinating for me. The first thing that happened after I lost the weight around that same time was that I started looking at the principles that cause addiction. Now, I was in FA, food addicts, for about close to 2 years. And then I moved into CEA How, which was for compulsive eaters. And to claim your seat in the room, I was never in OA, Overeaters Anonymous. To claim your seat in the room, you stand up and you say the equivalent of, I'm Hallie and I'm an alcoholic, but because it's food, you say, I'm Hallie, I'm a food addict. Well, I learned very early on that I was not a food addict. And then when I went into compulsive eaters, I learned, well, I'm not really a compulsive eater too. I can eat compulsively, but it's not a principle that I live by. I simply do not have an addictive personality. I gave up cigarettes just as easily. And you don't give up food or anything, but what's important is that you understand your own process. And for me, it was good enough to claim my seat in the room, my right to be there. I became willing to say, I'm Hallie and I'm a food addict, even if I wasn't, even if I didn't relate to that, because it allowed me to keep my seat in the room. And what I learned very quickly, and my sponsor said this to me one day, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, and it stayed with me, and it's why I stayed in that program for so long. I learned that control is the master addiction. And now that resonated for me. I may not have an addictive personality. I love to drink, and yet I will give it up regularly because it's just, I want to do a cleanse or whatever. I give up flour and sugar regularly when I want to lose a few pounds. It's not an issue for me. I can eat, very clean for as long as I would like to. But that master addiction of control, that was a thing for me. And it was my great joy to stay in the room for all those months so that I could work on giving that need to control over to my higher power, which is, how they talk about that. And I went through such processes, such spiritual processes doing that, learning to use the word surrender and being okay with the idea of surrender, and understanding that surrendering was not waving a white flag and that I was not giving something up. I was simply giving over to something that was bigger than me, that could help me more than I could ever help myself on my own. And then there was the idea of getting on my knees, which is another principle that they use in 12-step. And, the guy who wrote the big book, the Alcoholics Anonymous book, Bill W., that is what he is known as to history, as Bill W., was a contemporary of Ernest Holmes, who wrote the Understanding the Science of Mind, and who created the concept of science of mind, which is a spiritual principle, a spiritual religion, but it's really the idea that there is a scientific approach to prayer, and that you can create your life using this scientific approach to prayer, which is uses the principle that we are in co-creation with our higher self, and that through that co-creation process, we can experience everything that we desire, as opposed to beseeching a God who is on the outside of us. We are in co-creation with our higher power to allow everything that we desire that already wants to come in to happen. And 12-step and Science of Mind have so much in common. They weren't just contemporaries, and the story is that they exchanged books after they were both finished, and that Bill W. said, well, mine's easier to read. And then they both went off, and Ernest Holmes did Science of Mind and Bill W. did AA, and the rest is history. So for me, that concept of really being in co-creation with my higher power, that came in waves. And I was in Science of Mind studying it at the time when I discovered AA. And it was, and I read the big book cover to cover many times. It was just beautiful to me. It was, I thought it was a Christian program, and it really isn't. It's a spiritual program. And there are atheists in AA and in all the other, there's an A for everything. There's like sex addicts and drug addicts and all of it. And I found that both concepts were deeply spiritual. However, I had such a hard time with the idea of getting on my knees. That was one of the things you're supposed to do, is get on your knees, and every day. And I couldn't until the day that I did. And then there was so much surrender and so much grace in that I began to crave that. And every morning, and again, so embarrassed, I couldn't let my partner see me for the longest time. I had a little walk-in closet. I would go in the closet and close the door, and then I would get on my knees. But it was what I needed to do at that time to give myself permission to stay in the principles of the program. It was the working out at the spiritual gym piece of it. So when I left, it was because I was really tired of no flour, no sugar, and no booze. I wanted to drink. I wanted to eat cake when I wanted to eat cake. And I felt like there was really something out there for me that was bigger than that. And I'm still in that exploratory process. And one of the things that I've discovered, and my body is starting to age. I'm getting older. I see a difference between myself now on camera than I did like 3 years ago or whatever. But what I see is that it's so much about how we speak to ourselves and how we sound when we speak to ourselves, and how we send out these messages, and how much energy is going into that story of what we are like on the outside. And your feet carry you around every day beautifully. Your hands do whatever it is that is required. They pick things up and they create masterpieces of cooking or of art or of writing or of house cleaning. And our mouths communicate our thoughts to the world. And all of these body parts are working in tandem. And, to say nothing of the tens of hundreds of automated processes that happen for you every day, like your heart beating. And we don't focus on any of that. We should be like on our knees saying thank you to our bodies every day just for the stuff we do that we're not even aware of. And instead, we're busy saying, my belly's too fat. I have cellulite. This double chin. I need to lose weight. I can't have the person that I want in my life because of the way that I look. I can't have the money or the clients or the job or the family or whatever in my life because I'm too this or I'm not enough this. And most of the time it has to do with how we look. It has to do with our beliefs in the way that we interact with our bodies. Now look, if you don't have any body shame, mazel tov. I'm so happy. And you should have a whole podcast series just about that, because everyone that I work with, everyone almost ever that I've encountered has so much shame around their bodies and so much of their energy is going towards telling themselves that they can't X because of the way that they look. And then there are these feast and famine cycles, and I mean that literally and figuratively, where, for example, you diet like crazy, and then you binge, or you swear off of something and then you have too much of it, or you tell yourself, I'll never this again, and then you find yourself really, really doing a lot of whatever that thing is, or you overwork out and then go into periods of sloth. We have these beliefs, we have these stories, and so many of them, they're so old that they're legacy stories. The women were, for the most part in the 20th century, women were, if not voluptuous, at least allowed to have curves until Twiggy. When Twiggy, the model Twiggy, came along, she was, as I think it was Helen Fielding in Bridget Jones' Diary, who talks about thin women as stick insects. So Twiggy would be a stick insect because she was so thin. And then in I guess the 80s, Kate Moss came along, and Kate Moss was Twiggy, but a generation later. And it caused a conversation around anorexia, which was an important conversation to have. But it also caused a lot more women to begin to diet and to begin to be ashamed of their bodies, even if it was just because naturally, they had tatas. So the question is, where are you at in your journey with your body? How much of your time, how much of your energy are you spending with this legacy conversation of, I need to look like this? Because so much money gets poured every year into the continuing story that we need to look a certain way, that we need to show up physically in a particular way. Now, it's changing somewhat. Wonder Woman recently has actually helped. Although then the idea that, you have to be an Amazon and you have to be able to fight well in order to have that strong body, those are other things that, we probably need to work on as well. The invitation for us is to get called into a relationship with our bodies that is one that we love. And to be kind, so kind. The wonderful writer Anne Lamott talks about the kindness of pants with a stretchy waist, so that you aren't strangling your body by putting on jeans that are too tight. And I was so struck by that metaphor when I read it, that stretchy pants are kind to our bodies. She's so right. And we get to really think about and choose moment to moment, day by day, what we're going to put into our mouths, what story we're going to tell about that, and how the relationship that we have to our physical beings, how close that is to worshiping at a temple versus feeling like it's a garbage dump, and that we have less value because we're worshiping at the garbage dump instead of worshiping at the temple. I have struggled so many years with this, and I finally feel like I'm in a decent amount of alignment with my body, a decent amount of honoring myself, honoring the way that I look. I'm in my 50s, and I like the way I look better now maybe than I ever have. And I'm heavier than I was when I got off of that no flour, no sugar 2.5 years. And yet I love my body because I'm honoring my body. And I hope very much that as I age into, my 80s, my 90s and beyond, that I also can honor my body. There's always going to be somebody thinner than you, or younger than you, or prettier than you. And if that's not a conversation that you need to have with yourself, that's awesome. If it is a conversation that you need to have with yourself, have it now, because better now than 10 years from now, after you've been through another 10 years of beating yourself up or shaming yourself because of the way that you look. I was at a Chinese restaurant the other day, and a woman walked in with her midriff showing, and she was fat, and her midriff, I mean, quite obese, and her midriff was obviously very deliberately showing. She had knotted a non-midriff exposing shirt up higher above so that you could see her tummy. And she sat down at the table next to me, and my first reaction was of wanting to shame her. Why does she have to look like that? Why do we need to see her fat tummy? I have the same exact experience when, I go down to a swimming pool and I see, big old bellied men with their tiny little Speedos. It's how I was raised and how I grew up believing that if you had a lot of flesh, that you should keep it hidden. And in fact, I never exposed my arms above the elbow as a girl or growing up or in my 20s until I lost all the weight the first time, because I didn't believe that I had the right to show my upper arms off because they were heavy and jiggly. And that's a story. It's a belief. It's an untruth, whether it's about me or about the lady in the Chinese restaurant. And I've been spending some time at the Hard Rock recently in Hollywood, and people walk around the hotel wearing all kinds of costumes and with all kinds of flesh hanging out. And they're celebrating their bodies. They're enjoying their bodies. They're showing their bodies off, all shapes and all sizes. And to me, that's a gift. And it's a gift that they're inviting me to participate in. And if I don't go, that's my shortcoming, because they're just enjoying themselves. They're enjoying their physical body temple. And that is the opportunity that we all get to have. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Your Goddess Awakened. I hope that you will write to me on social media, whether I know you or not, and let me know if it struck a nerve or if it was helpful for you. And I want to invite you to like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you are watching this on. Until next time, blessings.
You have just listened to another enlightening and transforming episode of Your Goddess Awakened with Hallie Evelyn. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and join us again next time so you can continue your journey towards a full transformation. For additional resources and to learn more about working with Hallie Evelyn, visit HallieEvelyn.com. Receive more, do less, and love your life. Only here on Your Goddess Awakened.